Welcome to the Higher Love with Megan podcast with me, your host, Megan Cooper, a holistic coach and trauma-informed practitioner. This podcast seeks to break out of the echo chamber of societal narratives that perpetuate our institutions and challenge the status quo of wellness and beyond. Join me as we decolonize our minds, address and use our privilege, and prioritize inclusivity. Here, diverse experiences are honoured, and together we are fostering a space that stands for higher love for all. As a listener, you are not just here to passively consume. You're an ambassador for deep healing and societal evolutions, ready to engage in thought-provoking, challenging conversations. As your host, I'm committed to providing ever-expansive spaces that inspire us to contribute to a world defined by higher love. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Well, Rayya, it's so great to have you here for this conversation today. I've been really looking forward to having you on the podcast ever since Kerry Jarvis connected us. And yeah, just grateful for you spending time and energy with me today. So welcome to the Higher Love with Megan podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So I thought that we would just begin by me just reading one of the many lines that have touched me from your account over the last year. And this one is actually pinned at the top of your profile. So I thought that I would just read that, which is: the human nervous system needs safety in order to allow a deep breath. Your deep breath is a privilege. Please pause, take a deep breath, and recognize that is a simple but profound privilege denied to many today. So I wanted to just acknowledge the power of this. And yeah, as we take a deep breath and open our conversation today, it really struck me that. So thank you for sharing.
I've never had anyone read my words back to me. That was really powerful. Thank you. Yeah, the breath world has been so taken over by so many people who fail to recognize the wisdom traditions that come behind what's now called breath work.
Yeah.
And I try to separate myself from that kind of world, and yet at the same time, it's my life. It's reconnecting to that wisdom through our breath. So yeah, that sentence I think was written very early on after October 7th. And it was, I think, one of the posts that made me realize I'd never really spoken about parts of me before publicly. And that was one of the posts, I think, where I was, this is me. And yeah, here I am.
Yeah. How was it for you to put those parts of yourself out there, the kind of more vulnerable parts of you out there? How was that for you?
It's been a really vulnerable experience. I started this Instagram in response. I was working with a gym. I work with athletes, and we were doing some sort of journaling with prompts, and I would put prompts and it would be our practice. So it started as an exercise in presence, and then when that finished, I just kept going, and clients of mine and people who know me started to participate in this journaling. And it was always, it became part of my own practice, even when I was no longer leading a group practice with it. And I never thought that something would happen in the world where my private practice would become so public.
Yeah.
And so it's been very vulnerable, and at the same time, very healing somehow. Even though I have a small account, but I get reposted a lot. And that means I get a lot of people who disagree with my words. So I get a lot of pushback. And that's also been really interesting. As much as I get people who are kind and loving and reciprocal like you, I get the other too. And that's just been very strange for me. And but it's all a growing experience. And if one of my words can mean something in someone's consciousness about how our own breath is tied to collective liberation, then, I can die happy, I guess.
Yeah, totally. It sounds like there's a lot of purpose and I guess connection to the why for you. And I've seen that, across many of your posts as well. What was the inspiration behind the name, The Breath Activist? And what does it mean to you today to be the breath activist?
Right. Well, it had nothing to do with what it is today. So the world, quote unquote, that I operate in is performance and athletic. And here I am, this older lady telling them how to breathe. And so I wanted to counter the, breath is about deregulating and going down in our nervous system, that we can upregulate with the breath if we need to, and we can use our breath in all all the nervous system ways to get you to perform better. That was my role for these guys, right? So it was a word that came as a rejection of their idea of me as the one who's going to put us to sleep, and with her meditation and her breath. I was activating their nervous system. And very often when I work with them, we work with activation to then work with deactivation. And, a lot of practices out there is, we got to be zen and we got to be peaceful. Well, a healthy nervous system is a nervous system that can work in all the ranges, especially if you're an athlete. If you're a tennis player and you get really pissed off and you get really activated, you need to find a way to re-find your center, right? So that's where the name came from. And then after October 7th, everybody just assumed that it was, this activist in the political sense, and and I think I even made a post about what is breath activism to me. And it's really merging my respect and honoring of the human breath with the human struggle that we are facing all over the world. So the name did not mean anything then what it means now.
That's amazing. I had no idea about that. Because you would think, activist, activism, but actually I had no idea that it related originally to the nervous system. So obviously there was something there that you were moving into perhaps before you moved into it. So yeah, amazing. I didn't know that. So I'm curious as well. I don't know this really. So, I'm just curious about your background and kind of how you got into where you are now, where you were born, where you were raised, where you grew up, kind of a little bit about kind of your life trajectory and kind of how you got to, where you are today.
Where I am today, I am currently in Ohio. It's known today as Ohio, originally Shawnee land. I was born in Beirut, raised in Beirut. We left just before the 82 Zionist invasion and destruction of my homeland. I was raised incredibly privileged safety, grew up in Europe, and came to the States in 88 for college. Had my first encounter with the real America. That wasn't the America that I knew from television and from growing up in the Middle East, kind of, the American dream. During the Iraq War, I was on campus and realized how much anti-Arab and anti-Islamic sentiment there was in America. And was always someone who was interested in social justice and knew that's what I wanted to do. My dream was to work for the UN. I eventually graduated, did a master's, started working on a PhD, which was going to be about the role of storytelling in Arab feminism, Arab Islamic feminism. And in about, I guess it was mid 90s, I think 94, 95, I was 24, 25, around there. I was asked to join a group to go to China to the UN Women's Conference. It was going to be this big get together of women from all over the world. And I thought, yeah, finally, I'm going to be able to find people like me and outside of the really colonial idea of academia, of what feminism was in academia, people who are going to feed my thesis and nourish me. And I got there and I realized this was not it. There was a real disconnect between the ideal of the conference and what I witnessed and what I was part of. Just very basically, I was part of the royal delegation of Jordan through AU, where I was interning, and a really good friend of mine was part of a Sudanese delegation. She was staying in a tent. I was staying in a really lovely Oberoi. Young Rayya got her to come from the tent to me. Rayya now would have gone to sleep in the tent. But that was really that exemplifies what the conference was about. So much disconnection between all these women who did not want the same thing. Yeah. And I would love to tell you that I came back and thought, I'm going to change the world and I'm going to do this. And I did not. It was a time where anyone with half a brain and a degree was offered money to work on the internet and e-commerce. And I dropped my thesis and dropped my PhD and got sucked into capitalism in New York City. And that's where life was almost drained out of me. I worked really hard, did really well in the capitalist world. Fell in love, got married, had kids, got sick. And that was like a bit my moment of awakening, like, what am I doing? When you're sick in New York City, I was pregnant with my second, and you start to realize, I started to realize at least, all the things that mattered to me before I had put by the wayside. I'd always taught yoga and it was kind of my side job. But even that, I kind of, got disgusted with that and stopped that. And I started craving all the things that I had been passionate about as I was younger. Long story short, I ended up here in Ohio 10 years ago. And long nights of the soul, radicalizing in the sense, going back to my roots, going back to earth, to land, and understanding that I was, a colonizer here too. A lot of healing work I live in a village called Indian Hill. If that's not a message that I needed to work on my relationship with the land, then I don't know, what is. So that's what led me all the way here to talk to you because of the breath activist. But I never really re-entered the yoga meditation world. That was my mother's world, my world for a while in New York, because I knew it was toxic and I knew I had to find something else, which is why I worked with athletes, which was a much more, an easier way to do what I loved.
Yeah. Amazing. What a journey to get to where you are now. It's always interesting to hear of the kind of multitudinal facets that brought somebody to where they are today. There was something that you said in there about this realization of you being a colonizer. How was that for you? How was that moment for you, or the kind of slow recognition of that? How was that for you?
It was terrifying. It's really scary when you fled your homeland because of colonialism, and then
Yeah.
you realize here you are perpetuating harm in a different way. No, I didn't shoot anybody, I didn't, but I still perpetuate harm by participating um, in the world that I live in.
Yeah.
It's a very, and it's not something that that I will ever extract myself from, I don't think. Um, as long as we're alive, unless we are living, in the middle of the Amazon, we are a part of this harmful machine. And my intention every day, at least, is to heal my relationship with this land before I leave. I plan to leave America as soon as I can. So heal as much as I can and thank the land for almost a quarter of a century now that living here. And causing the least possible harm that I can cause by continuing to live my life.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people in the quote unquote spiritual space tend to take themselves out of that harm equation. And if I can say that my story made me different, is that I'm fully aware of the harm.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of your posts, and, I think many, many, many posts that I've read and witnessed over the last year, especially since October the 7th last year, is around this us perpetuating harm and recognizing that even if we think that we're doing the right thing, the good thing, we're still in this cycle of perpetuating harm. And that's a big process, to kind of come to terms with. And like you just said, trying to then tread as lightly as we can to heal our relationships to ourselves, to others, to the collective, to the land, to try to, I guess, reduce that harm as much as we can, whilst recognizing that we are in this almost kind of polycrisis ecosystem of everything.
Yeah, it's a big job that we have come to do. And I love, if there's one thing I love about Instagram, the platform that made me meet Carrie and you, is that it does connect people who are trying to do their part in dismantling the system and causing less harm within the system. And as much as we bash on this platform, it's something that I'm incredibly aware of and grateful for.
Yeah, totally. I say this every day. I said it to my podcast producer yesterday, Lucy, that, I also bash on Instagram and the algorithms and things like that. But yes, the ability to connect with other like-minded people is, really quite something. Just a question for you. I'm just curious, somebody with your background who was born in Beirut, with, Lebanese heritage. How is that for you living in Ohio today? I know that you said that you're planning on leaving America. I'm just curious how it is for you.
It's not pleasant. The first few years are really, really dark and difficult, especially since I lived most of my life in America, in Europe, where you don't feel so much. You don't feel so much the anti-Arabness and the anti-Islamic and this American superiority complex that they have. It's really, really obvious here. Their version of Christianity is very obvious here and very suffocating. There's a church on every corner, and you kind of wonder what they are learning in these churches if, the founder of their religion's land is being decimated and no one says a thing. That's always really bothered me. My daughter has had a lot of really difficult incidents at school because she's turned out a bit like me, a bit of a big mouth and says whatever is on her mind. there is an incredibly powerful Zionist presence in Ohio. I don't know why. My neighbors right next door are Zionists. They've always had a really large Israeli flag at the back of their yard. They took it down October 7th because they were concerned for security. And, you know, I can tell you that if I had a Palestinian flag, it would not be okay. So, yeah, Ohio has been incredibly difficult, but at the same time, you know, when I came to Ohio, after being the primary earner for my family, it was decided that I could be a mom, which is what I wanted to be. Ohio gave me that. And this land gave me the opportunity to learn and grow and study all different Indigenous wisdom modalities that I would not have had time or money to access had it not that I'm living in Ohio, where the cost of living is so much lower than in New York, right? So, yeah, it was hard, but I'm also really grateful for my years here. It's time to go though. So, yeah, I am wrapping up. My daughter's 17. She'll be going to college next year in Europe. So slowly we'll be moving away.
Yeah. Yeah. And something that you said there, and a post that I saw of yours was bringing attention to the importance to really center Indigenous wisdom, especially, you know, for those of us in the wellness arena, with so many of these kind of, I suppose, what people think of as new things that have actually been appropriated from a lot of Indigenous wisdom, and the importance to really look at kind of where people have been studying, learning, what teachers people have been learning with. And, you know, if we're using titles like trauma informed, or, you know, any of these things, to actually really be giving a lot of reverence to Indigenous wisdom. So I'm just intrigued a little bit about kind of what learnings you've been doing, connecting to the land where you are at with Indigenous wisdom.
I'll start by saying that I think that everything that's being taught in this container that I've kind of moved in, you know, in and out of, is Indigenous wisdom, right? And we all come here and say, you know, I'm going to sell you this and I'm going to sell you that. You're selling Indigenous wisdom. If you've ever taken a class of mine, I say that I would have nothing meaningful to say if it weren't for my teachers, plant, animal, and human, and all the ancestors and teachers that came before me. And I really, and if you take a lot of my classes, you heard me say that a lot, but it's really important that there's so much ego, because that's what we've been taught, right?
Yeah.
There's so much ego that comes through when you've absorbed and maybe embodied a piece of wisdom that you think it's become yours, and so you can share it. And you can share it, and we can all share it, as long as we acknowledge that it's not ours.
Yeah.
And there's so little of that in this space. I am dismayed to tell you that I have studied under teachers and with teachers who I later realized were not who they were. I thought they were. And some of my biggest learnings have come from that realization. I'm someone who studied Reiki for a very long time. I studied under 3 different Reiki masters. And I became a Reiki master the first time. Something didn't feel right. I became a Reiki master the second time, and something didn't feel right. And so I'm like, I thought it was me. I found another Reiki master. And halfway through, I realized, no, Rayya, this is something way bigger than you not being worthy of being a Reiki quote unquote master. So I went in and started unpeeling the layers of the teachings that I'd received, and realized that Reiki itself is a colonized thing. Usui Sensei, the founder of Reiki, never called his teaching Reiki. He was an animist. He was a Buddhist monk. the emperor at the time asked for his support. And that was the beginning of the colonization, indigenous colonization, like the emperor was Japanese. And so Reiki came as a way, or Usui Sensei's teachings came as a way to help the imperial army. And then it was taken to Hawaii, and then it was stripped again of its Buddhist and Shinto and indigenous to make it sanitized for the Christian world that it was going into. And so people often ask me when I'm doing energy, like, do you do Reiki? I'm like, I studied the teachings that came to the West, that started through Usui Sensei, but I really went deep into studying Shinto Buddhism and animism, and then wanted to be able to practice and didn't feel right in doing that since I'd self-studied, and went deep into the indigenous healing practices of my own culture, which I feel now I'm at a place where I can say I practice healing and be okay with it. So yeah, my learnings and have been a lot of realizations on my own. And again, I wouldn't have had that opportunity if I was not in Ohio and just focused on being a mom and having free time. So I'm really privileged to have been here, even if it was really hard.
Yeah. A question came up for me just whilst you were speaking around kind of what you would love to see more of for practitioners within the wellness space around looking at the way that we're working. But actually, I wanted to shift that slightly, because I know that I saw a post from you talking about our soul contracts and describing embodying your soul contract in service of collective consciousness. And perhaps instead of speaking to kind of what you wanted to see in other practitioners, it would actually be answered by me asking you, what is your personal soul contract? And what can you invite listeners into here? Because I feel like that will answer the same thing.
That's a hard question. One of my breath coaches used to say, if she used to quote this American poet, and I'm not going to say the quote because I can't remember, but if I can help someone breathe one breath easier, then I've done my job. And I thought that was a really beautiful way of her explaining why she did what she did. And in a way, I wish that too. If for everyone whom I come in contact with, and if we could just all go back to the way we were born to breathe and reconnect with our own nervous system, a lot of the pain, suffering at both the personal and collective level wouldn't be there. So I'm going to continue doing that for as long as people let me. My classes always start with a really boring anatomy overview. Like, this is your breath. This is the musculature of your breath. You know, a lot of breath teachers, oh, breathe in. Like, you know, let's breathe like we were born to breathe. And it's in your, you know, using your diaphragm and using your pelvic diaphragm. And, you know, so it's, and I like to bring it back to that, to muscle, to our bodies. So I wish more breath coaches, if that's would really listen to themselves when they were cueing breath. You know, there's no real, you know, certification to become a breath coach. You could say you're a breath coach tomorrow, right? And there's in even all the certifications I do have, do they really make me certified? Do they? I don't know. But the idea that we can just cue breath and make it sound good because we're pretty and we're in Lulu and make it sound sexy or deep or what. No, like I often go to yoga classes, and you hear someone like, inhale love and exhale everything that's not love, and inhale light and exhale darkness. Like, why are we exhaling the shit we don't want? No, two reasons. One, because we shouldn't be dumping on the world around us, but more importantly, because it takes away our power as alchemists. We inhale oxygen in short form, inhale oxygen, exhale CO2. We are transforming, and we can transform. We don't need to breathe out shit we don't need. And that understanding, if people could just understand when they're cueing, every word matters, and every intention matters. And it's not that way now.
Yeah. There's a post that you wrote, which I'd love to build on that by, again, quoting you back to you. But I would love for you to speak to this, which is, between this breath and the next, an inner revolution. Between this breath and the next, a remaking from the inside out. Decolonization starts in sacred space in between inhale and exhale. Can you speak to this? Perhaps that's building on what you just said. But yeah, if you could speak to that.
Yeah, I don't know who I was channeling when I wrote that, because I sure didn't write that. There is so much power that we have given up by losing our relationship with our breath. And in reclaiming that power comes so much room for change. And so I really do believe, and I know that everyone who psychotherapists will say psychotherapy is the way, and this person will say this is the way. Like, it's so universal. We all breathe. It's like a pair of jeans, right? We all have a pair of jeans. We all breathe. And we all have a chance 22,000 times a day to reconnect to the fabric of life. And how many of us are actually doing that? It's all about this reconnection, right? So we try and reconnect in so many ways. And we go on retreats, and we go and we do this and we do that. But if we can't reconnect with our own mechanism of breath, the anatomy of how we were born to breathe. The majority of adults use their neck and shoulders and ancillary muscles to breathe. That in itself, that correction, would be a beautiful movement for change. Breathing with the anatomy that you were meant to breathe. Because how we breathe is how we feel. It's connected to your nervous system. So that alone is revolutionary.
How do you feel that statement, the last bit around decolonization, starts in sacred space in between the inhale and exhale? Can you expand on that a little more?
So respiration has two spaces, actually, in front of the inhale and in front of the exhale. Those natural respiratory poses are hijacked by modern life because we overbreathe, we don't pause, we don't breathe deep enough for us to be able to luxuriate and pause in those poses. So that stillness, which isn't really a stillness, because in that stillness is the gas exchange. So there is a transformation in that stillness, there is so much potential. So yes, it is sacred.
Mm.
Every place where there is potential for transformation is sacred. And it's there, it's in you right now.
Mm.
Again, none of this is mine. It's been written in the Vedas. It's been, Buddhist monks. And now modern science is like, oh, whoa, it's all connected, this consciousness. And it's connected with our breathing. I'm like, oh, really? They're rediscovering ancient wisdom. Great. So can we discover it in our bodies and remember?
Mm. Yeah. And I love that word, remembering. And someone else said it on a podcast as well, that it is around this remembering and not this kind of learning. And as you're saying there, it's not this kind of discovering something new. Again, it's that place of going back and remembering. It seems like such a significant word, the word remember.
It's so significant, and it's even a play on word. If you want to think that we get dismembered, we get disconnected with our own bodies, and then we get remembered. It's such an anti-colonial practice to remember.
Yeah. I'd never thought about it in that way. I love that. It's like a whole new avenue to that word for me.
Again, I'm sure someone else has said it before. It's not mine.
Totally. There was another post that you shared, which I'd love again just to reflect back to you, which is, you are alive during a live streamed Holocaust. How are you making your aliveness count? I thought that question was so powerful, and I would just love to ask you how you feel that you're making your aliveness count, and what can you invite listeners into here?
I want to be fully honest that I don't think I'm making my aliveness count enough. As long as one father, one mother, one child is dying, then it's not enough. And it's very defeatist. And I don't like to admit that, but that's the reality that I'm in. I do believe that there's a role for every single one of us. And making your aliveness count does not mean, we're not all Malcolm X's, but we can all make a significance in someone's life every day. That's what I was trying to get to.
Yeah.
And that was really for me. And a lot of, again, and this is now obvious to you and your listeners, a lot of what I write is for me. It's not for anyone. It's what I'm feeling, very raw. And it's, I probably wrote that on a day that I was overwhelmed by how much work we have to do. And how much work we have to do in so many different avenues.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing, actually, the I guess what's the word, the despondency that is actually present with, am I doing enough? Like, am I making the aliveness count? Because I hear you on that, when there is so much pain and suffering out there, how can we actually feel that our aliveness is counting? So thank you for naming that and for sharing that. And I'm sure, myself, I resonate with that. And I'm sure that a lot of people listening would do as well. So thank you for bringing that into the space. But I love as well that actually so I'm understanding that so much of what you write is written for you to hear back, but actually in you sharing it, it's so inspiring, certainly to me and the people that repost your content. So there's medicine obviously that comes through for others in you just writing what you perhaps need to share and hear.
Yeah, a few days ago, I wrote, again, I must have been feeling overwhelmed, and I wrote, every anti-genocidal act matters. And someone wrote me a really long DM about how she needed to hear that. And I realize very often that again, we're all connected. This is a human experience.
Yeah.
And by sharing what I'm feeling, it's going to resonate because we're all humans. And there is someone out there feeling the same.
Mm.
And we are made to feel less alone when you see your own feelings being reflected. Before I was a breath activist, I had an Instagram account, and it was my dog's account.
Mm.
And I had like 15,000 followers, and I had lots of love and dog love. Um, and I kind of abandoned it, but there was a group of people I kept in contact with. When Kylie got sick, I went back for advice. And now that Kylie's died, I've been processing some of my grief on there.
Mm. Mm.
And the amount of messages I receive from people thanking me for processing my grief publicly because of their unprocessed grief was really eye-opening to me.
Mm.
Like, okay, that there is something here that when I share, when I'm feeling, it allows someone to share what they're feeling. I think that's the only reason I stay on this platform, because there's so much ugliness there.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes so much sense, and I can definitely, yeah, relate to that. And having people such as yourself, sharing these, I it's hard to describe them as beautiful, beautiful posts, because they are beautiful, but they're also powerful and full of, a lot of all different emotions and parts of the human experience that bring out, yeah, different things within me. So I can definitely relate to the woman that sent you a longer DM to thank you for what you've been sharing. Mm.
This one of my posts, the first post that kind of got distributed a lot, like, I inhale pieces of you and exhale pieces of me.
Mm.
And that happens on Instagram a lot. And it's quite reassuring that there is this collaboration, even, online.
Yeah. Have you felt encouraged in any way? I mean, over the past year, with the devastating things that we've been witnessing on our screens, which have been absolutely abominable, have you felt encouraged by the number of people? Well, I know that there's still a lot of people who are not part of this, but the number of people who have reached out to you, who you have connected with, who do seem to be doing these kind of small or large contributions in the direction of collective liberation. Do you feel any sense of reassuredness around that?
I'm definitely hopeful.
Mm.
And I have been incredibly reassured by a few young kids, they must be in their 20s,
Yeah.
people who live in Cincinnati who have reached out to me.
Mm.
And it's been a lovely reassurance. And to know that even here, in what I feel is a cesspit of hate, here there are these young, brave humans doing incredible things, even though on a small local scale. So,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. There was something that you wrote, which was, I grieve, but I do not despair. And I thought that was a really beautiful stance for me as well, because it's also recognizing the grief that is present, but also holding, I guess, the torch of hope there.
Yeah, we can never. And um, yeah, been born in Lebanon, hope is
Mm.
definitely something that we carry in our bones. Our
Mm.
homeland will be free. It's not something that we have the privilege of abandoning hope. We don't.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes sense. And I guess something for us to hold on to when, we're witnessing what we do. Yeah.
Well,
There
thank you for
was,
witnessing.
oh, thank you for sharing. Yeah, there was a question that I wanted to ask for people that, that read your content, for listeners to this podcast. People who are within the wellness space, whether they are teachers, practitioners within the wellness space, or just people that are consumers of the wellness space, in relation to the Indigenous wisdom that is at the foundation of so much of this teachings, what would you love to see within that space?
Less talking. I think a lot of people just talk a lot, and they're so happy with having figured something out that they want to share it, and it's lovely. But we all need to be practicing more. We're all saying the same things in different ways, and it's great. And the more of us say it, the more we create the energy wave necessary to create change.
Yeah.
Right. So if words are energy and we're all saying it, but there comes a point where we need to practice deeply. And less talking, more practice. And that's something that I am battling with, because people need to talk to bring information out, but we need to practice in order to root and radicalize that, go into that information. A lot of the spaces are people just sharing and oversharing, but if you get stuck in that sharing and oversharing, you lose the potential to go inwards and process and embody and metabolize all the learnings.
So what I hear there too is a need for embodiment as well.
Absolutely. So all starts in our body, the body under our skin, body under our feet. It's really our bodies. They're the answer. And then when we hear of horrific stories like we heard yesterday, of having people have to drown their bodies in order not to be taken captive, it really puts into perspective the privilege that we have with our bodies and what we should be doing with them.
Yeah. And that remembering. I love that new stance on it's not a new stance, it's new for me stance today. A new perspective on that word, remembering, for our body towards the pursuit of collective liberation. There was just one thing that I wanted to ask. Earlier on in the conversation, I asked you around the soul contract in service of collective consciousness. And actually, there was something that you wrote. I asked you kind of around what you felt like yours was, and I jotted it down just in my trusty podcast notebook. There was something that you wrote. You feeling like your contract, a part of that was reminding us all of our connection in all the ways our ancestors showed us, in all the ways Indigenous people show us, and all the ways that I can show up for you. I thought that was beautiful, what you wrote there as well.
I hope I can hold that intention true.
Is there anything just in terms of what I've shared there that you wanted to expand upon?
I think that for me, after I finished my chapter here in the States, I plan to go live in Egypt as a halfway to go back to South Lebanon, where I hope to have my last breath. And spending a lot of time in Egypt lately, I've realized how not every Indigenous teacher has remained free of colonial thinking. And so my work in Egypt is going to be different. And I'm very scared and very, I'm going to see how that's going to work. Working with Egyptians, being non-Egyptian myself, and reminding them of the richness of their ancestral wisdom, and how maybe they are diluting it by, inviting a Reiki priestess from Arizona to come and, do a ceremony at the temple. That's the next chapter I've laid out for myself. And it's going to be different. And I'm scared, honestly. I don't know how it's going to be received.
Sounds like a very powerful chapter ahead, though. I hear the fear around that, but wow, what a powerful next chapter.
Inshallah, inshallah, and God's will. It will be, and you know what? They'll be learning from me in there, so I'm all in.
Yeah. Just one more question, Rayya. I'm interested in all of your pursuit to connect with the foundation of our teachings today, Indigenous wisdom, and all that you have experienced. How has that impacted the way that you parent your children, and how has it impacted them as humans?
Big time. The big joke is I have a son who's 20. His last year of high school, he was out of school more than he was in school, and they almost threw him out had I not fought for him. I definitely have a very different way of parenting my children, which allows them a lot of autonomy, and sometimes very difficult for my husband. I don't parent them alone, where he's like, why are you letting this happen? But I got to live the talk in my household. Otherwise, it's not real or authentic. And they both think I'm crazy most of the time, but I think they're a black sheep, both of them, because of the way I raised them. And I hope that's not going to be a disadvantage, honestly. I don't know. It's a big gamble.
But I think that the world needs a few more black sheep. So it sounds like it's a good thing.
We shall see. I don't know. It was, this live experiment with beings that chose me as their mother. Hopefully they chose me for that reason, and I didn't mess up too much.
Yeah. Beautiful. I would just love to finish just by one last question, just for listeners, of what would you love to leave as an invitation to somebody listening today?
To take time to listen to the earth breathing.
Beautiful.
Not alone.
Thank you. So people can connect with you on Instagram, The Breath Activist. Is there anything else that you would like to share before we finish our conversation today?
I have joined up with the Portrait Collective. I do a session every Sunday. It's free. And I'd love anyone who wants to connect with me to come to the Portrait Collective and breathe with me.
Yeah, amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time today. Really great to have you on the podcast. So yeah, just thank you so much for being here and for all the work that you put out into the world. I personally just, really appreciate everything that you share. So it's a real honor to have this conversation with you. Thank you, Rayya.
The honor is all mine. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening. It's great to have you with me on this journey towards higher love for all. Our time is our greatest commodity and gift, so thanks for investing it in yourself and sharing it with me. Please do take a moment to rate and review the show. all of which enables more people to find me and for me to connect with more great guests each week for both yours and my enjoyment. All links, references, and contact information is detailed too within the show notes. And I always love to hear your feedback, so feel free to hit me up on my Instagram at higherlove_with_Megan or via my website higher-love.com. Send your takeaways, and if you enjoyed this episode, please share or send on to someone else who would benefit. Until next time, big love.